I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and am recording today, the Darumbal people, and pay my respect to elders past and present, for they hold a deep and continuing connection to the land, sea and sky.
Being able to realize that that group of people, whether we're talking about someone older or someone younger, they're not trying to annoy you. At least in most cases. I have talked to some people who said, no, I am trying to annoy them. But in most of the time, they're not actually trying to, but it comes down to how that person grew up. And the first 25 years of our life tends to hardwire how we think about things.
Welcome to Trailblazing Schools, the podcast for educational leaders at the intersection of leadership, complexity, and intelligent technology. I'm Trudy Graham. This is a space for leaders navigating uncharted territory. We explore strategic leadership, ethical innovation, and how AI can strengthen the deeply human work of education. Welcome to the Trailblazing Schools podcast. Dr. Joe Azzopardi, wonderful to have you join me for this episode. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Trudy.
And Dr. Joe Azzopardi is an expert in intergenerational dynamics. So all of those relationships and connections and the interactions that we have, and sometimes tensions between the generations, particularly in the workspace, but I'm sure there's probably also things that come into play in families. But hey, let me not take away from your intro, Dr. Joe. I gave you the prompt around AI, writing your bio. Would you like to share it with us?
Yeah, it's funny. I use AI a lot, and ChatGPT just came out with a new version, and I updated it. And last night when I said, hey, make my bio, it had just updated, and it gave me this really small thing about me that was sort of nice, but didn't really talk about what I actually did. And I was like, what about my business? And it said, oh, you need to tell me about it. I'm like, I've worked with you for 2 years. Like it said, oh, I don't have access to, and I was like, you do have access. This is the paid version. And it said, oh, sorry, I do have access. Let me just check everything. And I'm like, oh, come on. But, okay. So this is what it wrote, 100 words. Dr. Joe Azzopardi is an intergenerational relations consultant, researcher, and speaker, helping organizations turn generational difference into stronger relationships, collaboration, and performance. Through intergenerational solutions, he works with leaders to move beyond stereotypes and understand what is really shaping their multi-generational teams. Drawing on more than 24 years across education, leadership, community engagement, and original PhD research, Joe combines evidence with practical human insight. Originally from Canada, he has lived in 4 countries and now calls Australia home. He's a devoted husband, father of 3, committed Christian, and passionate advocate for every generation being valued, connected, and empowered. It's always interesting what it comes up with. I've tried not to change it. I've been like, I usually go in and make adjustments.
Sure.
But I haven't this time. So, yes.
Well, I'm glad you didn't. And I'm also glad that it got over its little memory freeze and did remember you. And I have to say, with that intro, I am really looking forward to this conversation, Joe. So many aspects in there.
Yes. It's funny. It says he now calls Australia home. I've lived here for over 20 years, but okay.
There's a song title in there, right?
Yeah.
And can we just touch on teacher? education.
Yes.
Can you just
Yeah,
talk a little bit about that, Joe? Because I'm sure people listening in would love to hear about that part of your background.
Yeah, as it says, I'm originally from Canada. I did my training in Canada. I was trained as a high school biology teacher, was looking for work in Canada. I found a school. They were desperate for a teacher. They found me. I ended up my first year, I was teaching multi-grade primary in with 6 to 8 students across during that whole year. There was a little bit of changes. Every subject except for home ec, because the other half of the staff, which was the principal, she didn't want to teach PE and sport. So I also did PE and sport and spelling tests for prep through year 4 on Fridays. Yeah, so that my first year I actually did primary as well. But most of the time, then moved to Australia. I worked mostly in Victoria, and at a school when I started there, it was 250. By the time I left 7 years later, it was 650. So I saw it grow quite a bit. It's now over 1,000 students now. I was a head of department, head of the science department, shared. I did all the people side and the curriculum side, and there was someone else who handled all the stuff, because there's a lot of things in science, all the chemicals. So I let him deal with the non-human side of the job. Then I spent a year in New South Wales. I asked not to teach math because that's not my strength or my passion. And they said, yeah, we'll hire you. Got a teaching job here for you. There's science. There might be a bit of maths. Got there, and it was almost completely maths by the time I got there. And that was my last year of full-time teaching before I did a career transition. So, yeah.
Wow.
So that was my teaching time.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Sorry, I'm just going to take back to your first year. Was that a really small school?
Yes. Yeah, I think there was 18 students altogether.
I just asked that because a lot of the principals and teaching teams that I work with are actually in small schools, so rural, regional, remote Queensland, and even some of the other states.
I take my hat off to you. Yeah.
And I just wanted to, pull that out because I think that would resonate. And the other part too that many teachers will and school leaders will resonate with is the teaching out of your field. And wow, teacher shortage now, Joe. So if you wanted to go back, I'd guarantee you could get to teach whatever you want.
Yeah, I love mixing with I still think like a teacher, but I don't miss all the other things that goes with teaching these days, particularly these days. Yeah.
So you've done a lot of other things since, though, and we're going to dig into that. Some really fascinating work. But let's go with the next prompt around, as a guest on a podcast about trailblazing and leading into uncharted territory, what is the core message that your AI thinks you should leave with the audience?
Now, after what happened last time, I double-checked with it and said, is this actually what you think I would say, or did you just make this up? But it was like, no, I've looked at everything. Okay, just making sure. And this is what it said. Leading into uncharted territory doesn't mean pretending you have a complete map. It means being clear about why the journey matters, taking the next responsible step, and remaining willing to learn along the way. My work began with a question that existing generational labels and stereotypes couldn't adequately answer. What actually enables different generations to thrive together? Following that question required research, experimentation, and the courage to challenge accepted thinking. The lesson I would leave with listeners is that meaningful progress rarely comes from simply repeating what has worked before. It comes from noticing what others overlook, listening to people whose experiences differ from our own, and being prepared to build something better. Trailblazers don't need to know every turn in advance. They need purpose, curiosity, resilience, and humility to adjust their course. You may enter the territory first, but true leadership is not about traveling alone. It's about creating a path wide enough for others to walk with you. That's why I was like, do you think I would, but yeah, so I agree with it. I was just surprised by what it came up with.
I'm curious to hear how it lands for you when you read that.
Yeah, it definitely resonates with me. Statistically, from an educational perspective, I should not have even gone to university, just from my background. I struggled in school, was severely bullied. My parents were lower socioeconomic background. My dad was an immigrant, so I've followed in his footsteps and become an immigrant again. And so statistically, I shouldn't even gone to uni. So it is quite amazing how things have shifted, and just choosing. I didn't know what the path would be. I never thought I would do a PhD. I was surprised I even got into university the first time. And then when I got into teaching, that's when my mind, I think, really started switching on academically. You remember 90% of what you teach, right? Probably having to teach all those different things for primary and all the other subjects, that I'm sure that did something as well. But yeah, I've done, you should never say never. Everything I've said I would never do, I've actually done. When I was a teenager, I said I'd never be a teacher or a minister, and I've done both. I said I'd never go into business, and that's what I'm doing now. Yeah, so when it comes to trailblazing, you don't know what's ahead. You can definitely, I made a choice when I was in my teenage years that I was going to stop being scared, and I was going to stop listening to what other people were saying about what they thought about me. And I just thought, I'm going to show you, I'm going to do what I think would be great. And that's basically what I've done in all my careers. So, and some people have been really surprised at the changes we've done, and we've lived in different parts of the world. Yeah.
Yeah. And as I hear your story, as you tell it, there's so many parts of that where you have stepped into uncharted territory, places that haven't been navigated ahead of you, like migrating, like attending university, which you've done not just once, but if I understand it correctly, 3 times.
3 times. Yeah. Each a different field every time.
Really? Oh, so we got a bit bored with one field of expertise, so we'll build another one.
Pretty certain I'm undiagnosed ADHD, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that, Joe. I love it. In terms of getting to understand you, and the metaphor works, right? Like it's not about the ego. I try to shift that as well. We're not about being superheroes. It's just about that courage to do things that it's where it's not certain. And you spoke beautifully to, ignoring what everyone else is saying and thinking, which is the courage piece, right? And to chart your story, your journey. Yeah. Brilliant. If you see yourself as a trailblazer and you're looking for structured, strategic support to lead with clarity and conviction, visit trudygraham.com.au/connect. That's where leaders begin the conversation about working together. I'd welcome the opportunity to partner with you. So let's dig into your work now, and I'd love to know, what is it that took you to the intergenerational work? And then what are you noticing in leaders where this could be helpful for them?
Yeah. When I was going into my PhD, I was coming out of a career of working with churches, working with church groups, working with volunteers is a whole other minefield, similar to teaching, but different. And when you start a PhD, unless you're sponsored, the biggest thing is figuring out, well, what are you going to do? You have to find what's called the lacuna. What has not been looked at by anybody and what is possible to be looked at. And I realized, I looked through lots of different aspects. I was very interested in how people learn. I was very interested in people helping each other to become better. And I came across some books on intergenerational community. And I was very fascinated by it. I had actually, over the different careers I had actually worked with every single generation. The teaching, I had worked, like I said, all the way down to 5-year-olds. With churches, I had worked with 90-year-olds, 100-year-olds. And the biggest thing was whether I was teacher or in the other career, was trying to help people who had different mindsets because of when they grew up, helping them to try to realize, well, that group of people, they're not trying to annoy you. You actually have a lot in common with them. They just think a little bit differently in this sense. And so I realized there was very little research that had been done when it came to the intergenerational space, particularly in quantitative research. There was a lot of things out there that were qualitative, that were based on people's experiences, lots of interview things, a lot of philosophizing, which is great. But I basically tried to find a measurement tool to measure how intergenerational community can be. And I realized there was nothing out there. And so I ended up creating the world's first intergenerational assessment tool to actually measure intergenerationality, which I can say very easily now because I've had to use it so much. But yeah, so from all the previous research, which was mostly based on interviews and thinking about thinking, I came up with 5 characteristics that determined how intergenerational a community is. And really, you could use those same characteristics for looking at diversity to see how united a diverse community is. But I used it specifically to measure how intergenerational community is.
Yeah, okay, great. Now, this is really interesting because that was a word, diversity, that I heard in your bio that really intrigued me, because one of the things that I think is so important as a leader is to have the diversity of perspective and voice representing,
Yes.
representative of your school community. So, yeah, I'd love to hear some more, Joe. And you obviously came to this as well with a leadership perspective from your work with the church.
Yes. And also with teaching as well, I should mention. Having been a teacher in medium-sized schools, there were times where I was under leaders who did not take advantage of the diverse thinking of their staff, or staff who actually were good in different fields, but didn't allow the diversity of thought to help the school to become better. But yes, in churches, there was quite a bit of that when you have the progressive versus traditional points of view. And a lot of it is tied, not all of it, but a lot of it is tied to when and where did someone grow up. So, because a generation's actually a subculture. So what I found with the diversity piece is we are much better together. And when you have multiple perspectives, it can actually help you to have a clear picture of what reality actually is and how to problem solve. When you talk to engineers, they really love hearing me come in, because often engineers struggle with the relational bit, but they fully understand being able to see different perspectives, because in their line of work, they're problem solvers. And when we are working in a workspace, you actually want to have diverse thought. It doesn't mean that everyone has to agree with each other. I think that's rubbish. It's not really a tolerance thing either. It's okay to disagree with each other. It's just we can do it respectfully. Society these days has very much fallen into a lack of critical thinking, where if someone does not agree with me, they're my enemy, and
Yes.
I hate that person. And that's actually a lack of critical thinking, a lack of being able to put themselves in someone else's shoes. So it's a lack of empathy. When we are working with a diverse set of people, we make each other better, because we actually challenge each other to not be on the extreme. So if you have two people who have extreme points of view and you get them to work together, they will actually pull themselves closer to moderate thinking. Yeah, between the schools I worked at and the churches I worked at, and the time I've spent in the last couple of years working with organizations as well, I think it's amiss to not take advantage of the fact that we have people who have grown up in different time periods, and the people who have shared experiences with each other, they bring good things about that. And there's some things that aren't as great, but that's why we actually want a diverse group, because there's good and bad things about every culture. There's good and bad things about every generation as well. So when we actually come together, it helps cover up the negative things that we all bring to the table.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. It made me think too about that extremes that you just highlighted, and there's a piece around finding the common ground, but there's also a piece around a diverse perspective can bring something new and fresh that's worth exploring, not just in its originality or its ingenuity.
Yes.
Not that everything has to become mediocre and meet in the middle.
Yeah.
And I think that's to be celebrated, and something that we want as leaders. So, Joe, was there a moment when your thinking really shifted?
Yes. You mean shifted as to what took me onto this path, the intergenerational path, or just in general?
Yeah. Or even around this, was there an aha moment in your study where things just clicked and made sense and you could see the importance of the piece?
Well, one of the aha moments I had that led me to having such an interest in intergenerational thought was actually when I was helping out run a church group. And it was a young adult group. It was made specifically for young adults, which I was really happy about. My MA was leaning more towards young adult. And I thought, this is great. They won't have these shackles of everything. We've done everything this way and it has to stay that way. And so I was excited about it. But going into it, there was a lot of things they didn't have, which was frustrating. For one, they didn't have money. So the budget was terrible, because young adults, they're just starting out. They don't have very much. When we would come together to eat, they'd bring chips and cookies. It's like, really, guys? Like, can you bring something else? But that's what young adults, they sort of think, oh, yeah. There wasn't anyone in the community to mentor, because there wasn't anyone older. Whenever any of them got married and had kids, they would go to another community because there wasn't anything for kids. So they didn't really have that many people to mentor themselves. And what I realized is like, we're not doing that well because we don't have a diverse group of people. We had a lot of diversity culturally, but when it came to experience, and there was no diversity, and it was actually hampering all the things we were trying to do. And so we actually made changes, and it became a multi-generational community. And suddenly everything started to flow really well, because suddenly there was people who actually had professional incomes in the church. There was actually people who were like, no, let me teach you how to do that. There was kids everywhere. And so that was an aha moment where I realized we actually function so much better when we have a diverse group of people, as opposed to having a silo mentality where everything would be better if everyone was just my age group, whether that is a young group or whether it's an old group that doesn't want to change anything. We actually function much better when we actually have a couple of generations above and below us.
That makes such sense as you speak to that dynamic. And I guess there are, I'm thinking about other contexts where that exists. And my parallel is working with schools in regional Queensland that have a constant turnover of staff, and because of the location, have difficulty attracting experienced staff. So often the staff are all beginning teachers.
Yeah, because
And
they don't have a choice, and they need a job.
Well, they need a job, and they've don't have a mortgage and a family, so they're more able to move to a regional town. But the dynamic then within that school, within that staff group, is that everyone is of a young age, and even if they are perhaps a mature person but young in their career, so there might have been a teacher who'd had other life experiences, but they were only, basically a beginning teacher in their first or second year, as a placement. So what you find is some of those issues you just spoke to around not having mentors, which we know is a significant factor in combating the retention of young teachers.
Yeah.
When we see, and I use young, but, new teachers, we know the stats around how many we lose in the first 5 years. And one of the key factors is in combating that is having good mentors. And if you're in a school community that doesn't have any experienced teachers, it's near impossible. So you have to be creative around how you build those mentors in a regional town.
Definitely.
So thank you for sharing yours. And I'm now thinking, wow, this has impact.
And my wife, who was also a teacher, she had an experience where she was at a school where it was the opposite. It was a very established private school. She was one of the youngest by quite a bit, a decent sized staff, and she was excited to be part of it. But when they started to have the meetings, when there would be issues, she would mention something that was different, and half the staff who are quite old said, no, we've always done it like this. We're not going to do something different like that. And basically they would do that almost every single time she would come up with anything. And it was very deflating. So both extremes, when you have it just young, you have the lack of mentoring, and it can really increase the burnout aspect, because there's also a lack of people they can lean on just for when they're having a hard time. And at the other end, it's also not a good thing either.
Yeah. And I'm sure there are a lot of people listening in right now that can relate to that story where they've been in a workplace where they are, demographically different to the majority, and their voice isn't heard or appreciated. Yeah, wow. Across this podcast, you'll hear leaders navigating complexity with courage and clarity. If you'd like to see how that looks in practice, visit trailblazingschools.com/field notes. These field notes capture real stories from school leaders using AI as a thinking partner, strengthening leadership, not replacing it. It's free, practical, and designed to prompt your own next step. You'll find it at trailblazingschools.com/field notes. So, Joe, how would you describe the core idea at the heart of your work?
I guess the core idea is that, like I mentioned before, we're better together, and to have an environment where people have empathy, not just for how people are feeling, but also how people are thinking. Being able to realize that that group of people, whether we're talking about someone older or someone younger, they're not trying to annoy you. At least in most cases, I have talked to some people who said, no, I am trying to annoy them. But in most of the time, they're not actually trying to, but it comes down to how that person grew up. And the first 25 years of our life tends to hardwire how we think about things. When it comes to our understanding of rules and authority, when it comes to what is normal, what's okay to say. Like sometimes people will say, oh, some of the older people are saying things that are really inappropriate. And it's like, that's an example. Well, when they grew up, it was okay to say that. And it's clashing with someone young where it's like, no, you don't say that. That's not appropriate. So how we grow up really affects it. And workplaces where people can say, why is that? Why do they have such a hard time with that particular issue, and actually thinking about it from their perspective, asking what the issue is. And one of the core ideas is that it's not that we have different values to each other. We have different priority of values. We usually argue and have tensions about which great thing is the best great thing right now. That's what we tend to fight about.
Yeah, wow.
And just understanding that people don't usually want something that is outrageous. It's just usually not the same top priority as what you or me might have.
Yes, I can see that now. So, Joe, that would take me then to how do you see this idea playing out day to day in leadership?
Yeah. One of the big things that managers and CEOs will talk to me about and will complain to me about is, and actually those on the front lines will also talk to me about this, but from another perspective, and that's communication. And again, it comes down to understanding where people are coming from. A lot of senior managers will say, I'm trying to call my person who's in their mid-20s. I'm just wanting to call them and they're not answering their phone. And sometimes they don't respond. If they do respond, it's usually by text. And they get really upset about that. Someone on the front lines, what they'll talk to me about is they'll say, so they expect me to travel an hour both ways to go to a 30-minute meeting every week. Why can't we just have that meeting on Teams or on Zoom and just say it's wasting company time? And so you have two different generations getting irritated at each other. But if you actually think about it from the other person's perspective, there's reasons why people do things. And when we understand why they do it the way that they do it, it helps make sense. It doesn't mean we necessarily would agree with it, but if we can at least understand why it's like that. For the example, why don't the young people tend to pick up the phone? Most of them are anxious about answering phone calls. They're anxious about having a conversation with someone and someone telling them or saying something to them, and they don't have a lot of experience of thinking on their feet. And so they're worried about, what am I going to say if they say this? And I don't want to look stupid, and I don't want to offend anybody, and I don't want to look incompetent, so they won't answer the phone. But a text, they can take it, they can think about it, they can respond to it. And so they feel a lot safer with that. And part of the reason is we actually haven't taught them to be in those situations. I often talk to employers, and I'll say to them, well, I know you're really frustrated with the younger people, but one thing that we need to set straight is that it's our fault as older people that they are like that, because we trained them, we taught them, whether through the education system, whether through parents disciplining them, whether through the policies that politicians will create policies that sound amazing when they're in front of Parliament, but they don't think about what's the ramification of this policy in 20 years' time. They hand it to schools. Schools then have to follow through with the policy, even though we often don't always agree with what we're handed to by the State Department. And then that influences the kids. And so understanding that, well, they're like that because of us, like whether it was our intention or not, they're not choosing to be like that. It's because of the environment they've grown up in.
Yeah. The phone call is an excellent example, because as I think about that from my own childhood and teen years particularly, the phone was it, right? That, like, talking on the phone was the only way you could communicate with your friends, or a full written letter, like old school snail mail, posted, and they get it a week later. That was the thing. Had collections of them, pen pals was the thing, all that was that era. And now when I think about teenagers, they communicate with text, with Snapchats, social media,
mostly
comments.
instant. Yeah.
Yes. And you're right. They
don't have to wait.
Time. You can compose your text response. So it allows you, time to think. It's not that real-time interaction. Yeah, that's fascinating, Joe. Thank you. I'm curious now around what becomes more important for leaders as technology accelerates, and particularly now the world that our, young people are growing up in. Have you given much thought to that, Joe?
Yeah, I think two things. We need to remember that technology is not the solution, it's a tool. We need to not see the latest technological developments as the answer to things, but see them as the tools to help us get to the answer of things. And we did that with screens, right? And now we're like, oh no, the kids are on screens too much. Well, we did that. That's a solution to parenting. Here, have a screen. No, it's a tool, and it could be used for good or for bad. So technology in itself is neutral. It's not neither good nor bad. It depends on how we use it. So it's a tool. And I think the other component that I would say for thinking about AI and thinking about leaders, for us to think about, is in amongst all the technological advances, we must not forget the humans in amongst it. We must not forget, like, the worries people have with AI taking over people's jobs. If we actually, as a society, cared about individual humans, that wouldn't be an issue. But we often think about what we want, and we don't think about what's best for everyone. So I guess those are the two things I would say for that.
Yeah, thank you. So, Joe, if a school leader's listening and wanted to take one small step aligned with your work, where would you suggest they start?
Discovery call is a great way. So just have a chat with me. find out what your situation is, I actually have a free snapshot assessment that people can access on my website. So it's a very short survey, probably takes you 2 or 3 minutes to fill out. And it's a very watered down version of the big one that I do. And I have a school version of the big one as well, by the way. But it only takes a couple minutes. Fill out the details of the contact details, and you submit it. I'll actually create a free report for you, and so it'll give you an idea of what are the generational risks that are taking place for your school. Ideally, you get everyone's perspective on the full assessment, but at least from their leadership point of view, it gives them a bit of an idea of where the trouble point might be. But yeah, have a look at my website. I'm happy to have just a chat with you that won't cost you anything. But I know having data-informed decisions is a really important aspect of actually solving a problem. And too often, people will actually make decisions based on assumptions. So if we can make data-informed decisions, it helps us to actually come up with the right strategy to address issues.
Yeah, no, that resonates with me. And I think it will make a lot of sense to school leaders. So, Joe, you mentioned your website. Can you just share what that is so school leaders or anyone
Sure.
interested can find their way there?
Yeah, my website is unitethegenerations.org. So
Lovely.
all one word. So unite the generations, and that's plural. .org,
great.
and that's how you could find my website.
Yeah, and we'll pop that in the show notes as well. So, Joe, to round out the episode, I have 3 ritual questions, and I would love if you would want to play along and answer those.
Sure. I'll do my
so,
best.
Yeah. So, Joe, what's the best kept secret about where you are?
So I live in Toowoomba, Queensland, which it's actually the largest inland city in all of Australia. It was a surprise when we moved here as to how large it is. It's a great place to live and have a family. There's so many schools in Toowoomba. It's ridiculous. So it's a great place for raising kids. It is very hard to find housing here. However, that's one of the struggles we're having as a town or as a city. So yeah, so Toowoomba is a great place to raise kids, and it has most of what you'd want to do on the weekend or during the week. Yeah.
Yeah, lovely. I do love Toowoomba, except for how cold it is, but great. Lots of history, and of course known for its Festival of Flowers in the springtime too.
Yes, it is.
Joe, what's a book or film you'd recommend, and why does it matter to you?
This is probably going to be very different than most of the people on your show, because in the different careers I've had, everything has been very much about research and thinking and all serious things. But because of that, I tend to go the other way when it comes to unwinding. So I will usually I'll watch or read fiction because it makes it so it's more of a break. So a book series that I would read, and you'd actually find this in I think most school libraries would have this, is the Ranger's Apprentice series. So it's sort of got like a Lord of the Rings kind of feel. It's almost fantasy without the fantasy aspects in it. So it's set in medieval times. So it's, for me, because I have to look at so much data all the time, for me, when I switch off, I actually do the opposite, and I just have fun.
Yeah, sounds like a great recommendation. And finally, what's something that brings you comfort or joy at the end of a long week?
End of a long week, what we do as a family is we actually will have a an easy but tasty meal when Friday comes, where it doesn't take much work for us to actually make it, but it's something that the kids love. We'll have candles. We'll chat about the week together, and work does not happen for 24 hours. Once Friday evening comes, we just switch off, and yeah, that's really great. I think it's important that people have breaks where there's no work. Things can wait at least 24 hours before you look at your email, before you get back to some people about things. If we hang out with friends on Saturday as well. Yeah, so that's what I do.
Sounds perfect. Well, thank you so much, Dr.
Most
Joe,
welcome.
Azzopardi. It's been fantastic, like I said, to have you as a part of the Trailblazing Schools podcast. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to Trailblazing Schools with me, Trudy Graham. If this episode brought someone to mind, share it with them. You'll find further reflections, practical resources and leadership tools in the show notes. Until next time, lead with courage, seek clarity and keep trailblazing.